Hello and welcome back to the Underscored podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Kent, spokesperson and public relations manager for Young Voices. It's Monday, getting started with this week on February 11th. We are headed towards Valentine's Day. Much love to you all. We've got something important to talk about on the podcast today. It's the issue of deep fake technology. This is going to be, among many things, one of the defining artificial intelligence issues of our time. It might not necessarily be something that is a world-changing issue as far as artificial intelligence, like we are seeing sort of in the race against China on this technology, but domestically, our politics are in a state of turmoil. We've been debating rancorously the issue of fake news in this country since the 2016 election, and evidence of sort of Russian meddling in our elections has come to light, something that happens in all sorts of elections across the world, something that the United States perpetuates itself when it comes to foreign elections. But this is only going to get more severe. The issue of fake news has shifted in this country away from what are we going to do about it, to when is the government going to take action on Facebook and Twitter and start regulating these platforms? The political parties in Washington have sort of converged around a consensus that there needs to be government regulation of these platforms to control the flow of information and public discourse. It's a pretty alarming prospect. And again, it's not going to get any better as technology progresses and the nature of fake news becomes more complex. I'm going to speak today with two Young Voices contributors who have been looking at this issue and have been studying it and how it's going to impact our public discourse, our politics, and society. So we're going to cut to that conversation right now. So imagine a future where social media during election season is sort of a blur of arguments between your friends on the authenticity of remarks made by public figures running in the election. Video appears to capture Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sitting with Nicolas Maduro on a beach and sipping Bloody Marys and discussing the importance of seizing the means of production as soon as possible. Your timeline is aflame because AOC has not been proven to have taken this trip to South America and be hanging out on the beach, but damn it, she's in that video, and we all know she believes these things. So the video is at least true in spirit. You see this all the time, hoaxes that partisans eventually accept as being fraudulent, but they sort of reserve the judgment they made upon believing the hoax because it matched up with their previously held beliefs. Deep fakes are manipulated videos that can produce fake and hyper-realistic images and audio of people that are almost impossible to tell apart from reality. And they're already here. They're floating around the web. And my two guests today have some concerns and some thoughts to add to the matter. I'm joined by Lindsay Marchello and Ryan Khurana, both of Young Voices. Welcome to you both. Thank you for coming on Underscored. Lindsay, to start us off, you wrote about deep fake tech, most recently in Town Hall, looking at the tumultuous Covington school kid controversy and tying it to deep fakes as evidence that we are not ready to deal with this in the years ahead. Could you sort of set the table here? What are you seeing as far as a shortcoming? Is it in politics, media, culture in general?
It's definitely in cultural in general, but I think the media plays a part in it as well. With the Covington issue or affair, we saw people jump to a conclusion with a very short clip and form a narrative without all the evidence available, and they ran with it, and it went viral. And then when more evidence came out with longer videos, there were people who were changing their tunes, and they were coming back saying, okay, I got the initial story wrong. But there were still a number of people who were holding fast to the original narrative that the boys were the aggressors in the situation. And while this story was unfolding, I saw a report from CNN that the legislature, they're looking at how to identify deep fakes before they go out in the public and before they become super viral. How do we identify them? And I was thinking, as bad as the Covington affair was, can you imagine if deep fakes were introduced into that firestorm? I think it would make it 10 times worse than it already was.
Yeah, because we sometimes operate under the assumption that when new information comes out, particularly like the Covington issue, that the same people who got the first wave of bad information are just naturally going to receive the second wave of information. And first of all, we know that a lot of people just don't change their minds even when presented facts and new information. But secondly, there is no way to guarantee that if you just saw some bad report that you are then online and Facebook is going to then feed you the correct information 2 days later when it comes out. Ryan, where do you sort of stand on concern about deepfake technology, both as a matter of the body politic, but also sort of national security? Do you see this as being a big threat?
So the technology itself has really rapidly advanced to the capability of manipulating what a foreign leader is doing. There was an example from last year. A Belgian socialist political party faked a video of Donald Trump criticizing the Belgian approach to climate change and using very extreme language. And most people bought it, even though, and thought it was way beyond the pale in Belgium. And the party itself said we never thought people would take it that seriously, but it was a great way to draw attention to our climate change policies. So again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about them standing by their intention, even if they use doctor footage. And to what extent certain advertising campaigns like that are justified if it's clear that what you're using is doctored. It's that's a matter for debate. And but when it comes to the unidentifiable deepfake footage, where I'm passing it off as if this is 100% real and
Yeah.
trying to influence people as a result, there is a risk that this can affect general society. There's a risk that this is destabilizing, but there's two trends we have to look at in this end. One is the trend in the media, and you've already kind of hinted at this, which is that content itself goes viral, corrections don't. And so we have this media incentive to share first and the most visceral stuff. So I think the technology, its impact results mainly from a failure of the journalistic process. It's a failure in how people share information, and that's the only reason why this technology could make an impact in that environment. But on the purely technological side, there are certain limitations to how well deepfakes can work, and we see a lot of private action to restrict those capabilities. A lot of social media forums such as Reddit um, and I believe in Facebook, they have extremely restricted the ability for users to share information about deepfakes and post deepfakes. The original fake app that was developed is no longer able to be found on any search client. And you see this kind of crackdown on the scalability of these processes.
That's
That
interesting because I don't inherently disagree with, I don't know, I guess the technology being disseminated. Like we've kind of talked about this a little bit with 3D printing technology and firearms. Like I don't really believe that there should be a role in cracking down on the sharing of information unless it is then utilized for malicious purposes. And I feel like maybe that's kind of the same. Sharing information between peoples is sort of a part of a free society, but it's kind of what you do with that information that matters.
well, the point is that we have to remember that deep faking is a process. It's a type of approach to generative adversarial networks, which are ways of generating new types of data from existing data. That approach can't really be suppressed. That's like an academic concept. You can create it from scratch. What is being more cracked down on are the consumer based, easy to use tools based on it. Like the Photoshop of deepfakes, for example, is being restricted because they want to restrict who is able to use it and for what purposes. And this is private action that's doing this.
Are you familiar with who created the video of um, the actress Jennifer something from the Hunger Games and Steve Buscemi mashed together at the recent Oscars? Have you
Yes,
seen that video?
yes, I have. Yeah, so that the Jennifer Lawrence and Steve Buscemi,
Yeah.
that was a very interesting use of deepfakes, and I think it highlighted how far the technology has come. Like people neglect that the very fundamental kind of capability that allows this is only 4 years old. So it's
Yeah.
come very far in its efficacy in a very short period of time. But on the
Well,
flip side, the detection technology for it has also come very far. We have very advanced processes now. Obviously, this is not necessarily going to be used by the media, and that's where the incentive problem comes in. But in an academic setting, the detection processes for finding doctored videos has increased quite a bit.
well, Lindsay, with everything that Ryan just sort of laid out there, where are you at in terms of how we need to approach this?
Well, see, I'm not worried about the technology that's going to be available to show that deepfakes, what is a deepfake and what isn't. Like, I'm not worried that we're not going to be able to identify it. I'm worried again about the people who are going to see it and then they're not going to care if it's real or not. There's several times I've been on Facebook and I'm that annoying friend who likes to fact check some people, and they will post something that's just blatantly false. I think one of my friends posted a picture of Putin pulling Obama's tie close to him and being all intimidating. And I was like, well, this has obviously been photoshopped. And my friend was like, well, it doesn't matter that it was photoshopped. It speaks to a bigger truth. It Obama was weak to Russia. And, this just speaks to this bigger truth. And, like, nothing I could say could change their mind. So I'm really worried about that. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things we really need to focus on is media literacy and how people consume information online and on social media. And we all need to take kind of like a deep breath, sit back, and like look at all of the facts, look at different sources, look where the information is coming from, and then form an opinion that way.
So I like to think of myself as a free speech absolutist, but I'm a little unsure about how I feel on this subject in the context of free expression and then sharing. It's one thing for me to make a goofy video of Mark Zuckerberg appearing to thank Ryan Khurana for his love of technology and support of Facebook, which is something I did just yesterday using a website that sort of uses very basic AI to crudely mimic a public figure's speaking voice. But then the image sort of clearly looks like a puppet, sort of like Terrence and Phillip from South Park. It's obviously humor. But what about when it's not clearly humorous? You're distorting the public record of what a person has said. You sort of cross the boundaries into libel, do you not? Like, where is the First Amendment here in terms of making content that is, funny, but it is misleading to people?
We have certain legal actions taken against, especially those that have used it for pornographic purposes
Ah,
um, under the identity theft laws, and the earlier era when these have been used for revenge porn. That cyber stalking laws kind of cover that, and you can say that we haven't our cyber crime laws for how you use other people's information. Our enforcement isn't good enough, and the laws aren't well specified enough, and that's a discussion for another time. But there is
yeah.
an umbrella of laws that target the kinds of malicious activity that these purposes of deepfakes allow. And so that's the use of the technology in those ways is covered under existing cybercrime law and identity theft law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to ever make the case for overusing government power to sort of keep these norms in place, but like I'm just imagining the people who are going to offend, right, and sort of cross the lines when it comes to deep fake technology and using it are going to be these sort of basement dwelling Reddit and sort of 4chan kids who are making stuff at home and putting them out there, and then we're going to get some news story about one of them being arrested by the FBI and carted out of their house, and then the internet's going to sort of be in flame about, so we're arresting teenagers for making videos that a smart person should have known is not real. Like, a video of Michelle Obama on a date with Vladimir Putin, but there's going to just be this debate about like, what is common sense? Why should somebody have known it was a joke? And I sort of just worry about that. Like, you're going to end up with a lot of teenagers and sort of just average people being arrested and sort of taken under the arm of the law for making these videos. I mean, is that something that you worry about?
On that, we have to remember the importance of intention here. And obviously, this is it's a hard to prove kind of thing, and this is why we have very long-raging court battles on internet crimes generally. But if someone is clearly doing something for like satirical purposes, they can mount a defense that that was the case, and it'll be fairly obvious to somebody at least. But there are clear cases in which what you have done was for a malicious purpose. That was a malicious act. And we have to remember technologies are tools. They're means to an end. So we're not regulating the existence of the technology. We're regulating the ends to which that is applied. And so if you're using it to harm someone, the crime is the harm that you've applied through it. And what matters there then are investing in improving the detection techniques for this, ensuring that people are aware that using these technologies for harmful ends is a criminal activity. Like identity theft should be more clearly understood as, hey, even if you're taking a celebrity's face, that celebrity is a person and harming their image is a crime. And that kind of understanding of existing legal norms and how those legal norms are affected by the existence of new technologies rather than blaming the technology itself.
So let's take a step back, I guess, from the idea of the FBI kicking people's doors down, dragging hackers out of their basements, to sort of private legal action between individuals and then companies. So the gatekeepers in all of this are the people and the media organizations who allow for information to be disseminated. So the Covington school controversy is interesting because they have filed suit against a lot of media organizations, columnists, and TV pundits for defaming and damaging the reputations of these kids before there was proper information out there. Do you think that there needs to be, I guess, more legal mechanisms or a process put in place for media to screen things before they blow stuff up and then go, oh, well, we were duped, sorry. It doesn't matter if we tainted the public conversation. And same for Facebook. Facebook is terrified of being held accountable for faulty information and fake news on their platforms. But what about when it comes to this sort of content?
Well, so Facebook and online companies there, they would basically no longer exist if we held them responsible for user-generated content. But news organizations, they are exercising editorial capacities. And in that editorial role, it is their responsibility to go through fact-checking information and ensuring it meets a standard of quality, and that's why they're held accountable if they spread false information about someone. The issue is that I feel that we let them off the hook if they issue a correction. But they're gaming the system in a way because nobody reads the correction. And a lot of them know this is the case.
Lindsay, you've mentioned sort of media literacy and all this stuff. Is that kind of what you're eyeing as the real front lines of this battle is just user education and sort of the next generation of folks coming up through school, that they know how to spot this sort of content? Because, we all know that it's like our older generation family members and friends, our uncles and whatnot who share like the majority of fake news online. Is this just sort of a matter of adapting and educating upcoming generations to deal with this?
I do think it's a significant part of it is personal responsibility and how you consume news and participate in social media and whatnot. But I think Brian makes a really good point that the news organizations need to be held accountable to some extent on disseminating this information, especially when it's against private citizens. They put a world of hurt on these boys. There was threats. There was the school closed down temporarily. And I mean, that's a real problem. There's real consequences for this. So they need to be held accountable for that, especially, like I said, when it's private citizens. I don't think we necessarily need new legal options for that. I think we can use our existing libel laws to protect people, protect private citizens from this sort of action. But I do think in part, yeah, it needs to be personal responsibility, and an individual needs to take it upon themselves not to go onto like these online outrage mobs, and they need to sit back and take a moment and really work through the videos.
We often get pretty caught up in the negatives of certain technologies. I'm curious, Ryan, do you see any positive utilization for this kind of tech besides, making, I guess, better video games? I think that's probably the only thing that I can imagine. Cinematic sequences in games being more believable and easier to follow. I don't really even know what this tech is for besides malicious purposes.
Well, in its most kind of basic application, this is for entertainment purposes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you. Well, actually, I do know, Stephen, that you have seen the film Rogue One, and
Oh,
you know
yeah,
how,
yeah, of course.
and this is the same technology they use to bring.
Peter Cushing back from the dead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which again also brings in rights issues. Many actors have
Oh,
put
yeah?
it in their contracts that they do not want to be brought back to life after they die.
That's true. I had not thought about that. That's kind of the next frontier of entertainment, is whether or not we can get licensed actors, to come back and do new movies that they never agreed to.
Yes. And so that was a very clear application. And again, this exact same technology can be used to generate new audio as well, and it's being used in early applications of AI generating its own type of music, for example. And so there's clear purposes for the entertainment industry in using this. Um, there's also a lot of detection applications this can have, and which may provide national security benefit. By generating new images, you're also able to spot details and other things much better, and confuse an enemy in a combat situation. So there are non fake news applications to this. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. All right. Ryan, Lindsay, both of Young Voices, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with me today about this. I'm sure we'll have you on again to unpack this more in the future. That just about does it for this episode of the Underscored podcast. It is Monday, February 11th. I am your host, Stephen Kent. Our guests today have been Ryan Khurana and Lindsay Marchello of Young Voices. You can follow Lindsay on Twitter at LynMarch007. That's LYNN March 007. And Ryan Khurana at Ryan Khurana. As always, we will be back next week with more of the Underscored podcast to discuss issues sort of one layer beneath the news cycle and what is going to be important in the days and weeks and years ahead. You can follow us on Twitter at YVADV and find out more about Young Voices at www.young-voices.com. And please subscribe to the Underscored podcast on whatever podcatcher you use to listen to podcasts. You'll find us on there. Please leave us a rating, a review. Let us know what you think about these interviews and how we are doing. So with that, see you next week. And until then, stay free.